"I'm sorry, sir, but these seats are for registered veterans only." He didn't argue, didn't explain. Could this quiet man hold a secret? He just nodded and walked toward the fence. No one knew his name, no one asked why his hands were so steady or why his eyes never left the sky. 2 hours later, an F-22 broke formation without warning, without orders, and dipped its wings right over where he sat, because sometimes the loudest honor begins in silence. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The skies over Dayton, Ohio, pulsed with the low, familiar thunder of jet engines. It was airshow season, the kind of day that drew thousands, families, veterans, new recruits with crisp uniforms, children in plastic pilot helmets running with flag-stamped snow cones. Voices filled the air, cheers, laughter, camera shutters clicking like rain behind rows of shaded tents and metal barricades. The F-22 Raptor demo team was prepping for a performance that had taken months to choreograph. The announcer's voice boomed through mounted speakers, reading off flight stats and military trivia. Everything was tight, professional, every movement accounted for, and still no one noticed him. Near the far eastern edge of the tarmac, just before the restricted access line, sat an old man alone. His name was Samuel Whitaker. Most people didn't know that, didn't ask, didn't care. He was in his early 80s, dressed in a faded blue windbreaker with an old U.S. Air Force patch sewn over the heart. His shoulders were straight but not stiff, his hands weathered but steady, rested on a folded lawn chair cradled between his knees. His shoes were polished but worn, his expression unreadable. No badge hung around his neck, no press pass, no family to tow, just a quiet man by the fence watching the sky like he was waiting for something. Earlier that morning, he'd approached the volunteer table, asked politely where the veteran's seating was. The young woman behind the clipboard had looked at his windbreaker, then at his lanyard. "No registration, I'm sorry, sir, those seats are reserved for confirmed veteran guests." He didn't argue, didn't explain, he simply nodded, stepped aside, and walked back toward the perimeter, his pace slow, measured like a man used to walking alone. Now he sat with his chair unfolded, positioned with precision, facing the flight line. No umbrella, no snacks, just him and the sky. He didn't film, didn't cheer, he just watched, and from a distance, it was easy to ignore him, easy to assume he was just some old enthusiast, maybe retired ground crew, maybe a mechanic, maybe nothing at all. Could this silence hide a hero? But one person did notice. A boy, 12 years old, give or take, wandered down from the crowd, baseball cap turned backward, soda in hand. He stopped at the fence, looked at the man in the chair. "Were you in the Air Force?" The old man looked up, a flicker of something passed through his eyes. "A long time ago," he said. The boy tilted his head. "Did you fly jets?" The man gave the faintest smile, not amused, not distant, just remembering. "No, I watched them leave, and I waited for them to come back." Before the boy could ask anything more, a voice called from the crowd, his father, waving him back toward the tents. The boy muttered a quick goodbye, then ran off. The man didn't move, his eyes returned to the clouds, but someone else had seen the moment. Lieutenant Hayden Moore, standing behind the operations tent, binoculars around his neck, had caught the exchange. He was a junior officer on the event coordination team, mid-30s, career Air Force, sharp, detail-driven, and yet for some reason something about that man by the fence stuck with him. Hayden raised the binoculars again. The windbreaker was old, maybe 70s era, but beneath the large USAF patch, tucked near the seam, was something smaller, faint, a badge not many wore anymore, a single winged dagger over a lightning bolt. Combat controller. Hayden's breath caught. He zoomed in tighter. On the shoulder, barely visible in the frayed fabric, was a ghost of a patch, round with a silver star over a globe. Strategic Air Command. He stepped back, heart beating faster than it should. SAC had been disbanded decades ago. He opened his tablet, pulled up the archived veteran registry, entered what he knew. Combat Controller, Strategic Air Command, service period pre-1985. The list was short. He scrolled until one name stopped him cold. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel M. Whitaker, Combat Controller, Strategic Air Command, service in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, declared MIA for 6 days during a covert nighttime extraction. Awarded the Air Force Cross for saving the crew of a downed Phantom under enemy fire with zero air support. Final line of the file. Declined public ceremonies, never gave interviews, retired quietly in 1982. Hayden looked up slowly out at the fence. The old man hadn't moved an inch, still seated, still steady, still invisible. But now, damn, Hayden knew, and in the pit of his stomach, something stirred. Respect, guilt, urgency. He had no words for it yet, only the sudden, unmistakable understanding. They hadn't just overlooked a veteran, they were sitting 50 feet away from a legend, and no one knew it, not yet, but that was about to change. Could this discovery change the day? Lieutenant Hayden Moore stood just outside the operations tent, his eyes still locked on the man by the fence. The crowd buzzed behind him, vendors shouting over each other, children waving tiny flags. The announcer read off times, unit numbers, flight paths, but Hayden barely heard any of it. He stepped back into the tent, found a quiet spot between radio chatter and checklist printouts, and tapped the shoulder of the man in charge of the afternoon's headline event, Captain Derek Monroe, lead pilot of the F-22 Raptor demonstration team. Confident, focused, a technician in the sky, Monroe had flown through stadium flyovers and combat drills, but he ran his team like a symphony, tight, precise, never off. Captain, Hayden said, voice low, I need to show you something. Monroe glanced over. Did you? Distracted, you look like you saw a ghost. I think I did, Hayden replied. They stepped aside just out of earshot. Hayden turned his tablet, pulled up the file. He didn't explain, he didn't need to. Monroe scanned the screen slowly. Then again, Samuel Whitaker, he murmured. Yeah. Monroe's brow furrowed. I thought he disappeared. He did, until today. They both turned and looked through the tent flap, past the flight line, across the shimmering heat waves rising off the asphalt to the east fence. Still there, still seated, still silent. Monroe closed the tablet. No press, no interviews, no medal ceremony. Hayden shook his head, declined everything. Quiet retirement, no photo ops, nothing. Monroe stared a little longer, then he said it. If it feels right, we'll know what to do. He walked away without another word. The sky began to rumble. It was the kind of sound you felt before you heard it, low, deep, reverberating in your chest like the heartbeat of something ancient. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice thundered over the speakers, please direct your eyes to the sky. The F-22 Raptor demonstration team was ready for launch. All around the airfield, cameras rose like sunflowers, kids scrambled onto shoulders, the crowd leaned forward as if the very air itself were about to lift them. Then ignition, one by one, the Raptors roared down the runway and sliced into the sky. Their silver bodies shimmered against the sun, climbing with impossible force. The first pass came fast, diamond formation, 4 jets moving as one, tight, seamless, thunderous. The crowd erupted. Hayden stood still, binoculars down, not watching the sky, he was watching the man by the fence. Samuel Whitaker hadn't moved, back straight, hands folded, eyes on the Raptors. The second pass came slower, lower, a coordinated roll with perfect spacing. It was flawless, but Hayden's heart wasn't with the routine, it was with the choice Monroe would or wouldn't make, because there were no protocols for this, no playbook for how to honor a man who never asked for attention, no briefing for the moment when someone finally saw the invisible. And then it happened. The Raptors began their final maneuver, a sweeping 4-point peel, a showstopper. But just before the command break, something shifted, subtle, intentional. Raptor 1 peeled too early, slight change in heading, drop in altitude, no radio call, no correction from the tower, just quiet deviation. Hayden leaned forward, the announcer faltered, ladies and gentlemen, you may be witnessing a minor adjustment from the demo team, please remain clear of the. But the crowd had already turned, because Raptor 1 wasn't heading toward the announcer's stand or the center line, it was heading east, low, silent, directly toward the fence line. The jet banked wide, dipped its wings, and leveled out 50 feet above the asphalt, and in its path by him sat the man no one had noticed until now. Could this flyover rewrite history? Samuel Whitaker didn't flinch, he didn't wave, didn't reach for a camera, didn't even blink. He rose slowly, deliberately, and placed one hand over his heart, and the Raptor passed over him like a whisper. No roar, no afterburner, just reverence. A plane that wasn't saluting a rank or a title, it was saluting a man. The sound returned as the jet pulled up and away, vanishing into the light, and on the ground, silence, total, pure. One by one heads turned, not to the sky but to the fence, to him, a man who never asked to be seen, now the center of every eye. He remained standing, hand over heart, still silent, like he'd been waiting for this moment for decades. Not recognition, not applause, just a quiet salute. And for the first time all day the sky over Dayton felt still, because something sacred had just passed through it, and none of them would forget. For a few long seconds, no one breathed, no one clapped, no one cheered. The announcer's voice, usually so quick and polished, cracked across the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a minor deviation by Raptor 1, no cause for concern, please remain behind the barricades, we'll be resuming formation in just a moment. But no one heard him, not really, because the jet had vanished into the sun, and all eyes had turned to the man who hadn't moved from the fence, the man who had stood alone all morning, who had asked for nothing, and finally was seen. Somewhere in the stillness, a junior officer stepped forward from the crowd, hat in hand. He didn't say anything, he just faced east toward the fence and stood at attention. Then another followed, then another. Within seconds, the entire honor guard rotated on their heels, precisely in unison, and turned their backs to the flight line. They faced Samuel Whitaker, not the jets, not the stage, him. And the air shifted. A woman near the concessions lowered her phone, a teenager removed his ball cap, a man in a wheelchair dressed in marine fatigues raised a trembling hand in salute, and slowly, like wind rolling across a wheat field, the crowd began to rise, row by row. They didn't rise for the airshow, they rose for him. Samuel stood still, his hands still resting over his heart. Then gently he let it fall. He turned toward his chair and began folding it the same way he had set it up, carefully, deliberately, no rush, no fuss. When he was done, he clipped it to a small canvas pack, slung it over one shoulder, adjusted his cap, and started walking, not fast, not proud, just steady. And no one stopped him, but everyone made way. A mother moved her stroller to the side and a boy stepped back without being told. Two airmen standing by the security rail instinctively stood at attention. Samuel walked through the crowd like water finds its path, and the crowd parted like it knew, like it remembered. Hayden saw him approaching the staging tent. He stepped out, stood tall, chest tight, unsure whether to speak, but Sam didn't pause long. He slowed, their eyes met. Hayden didn't salute, didn't reach for a handshake, he just nodded and Sam returned it. That single nod carried more weight than any spoken word could have held. Then the old man kept walking through the side gates, past the equipment trailers, into the distance, gone. No fanfare, no name called, no medals pinned, but no one in that crowd would forget what they just witnessed. Not now, not ever. Down at the tarmac, the F-22’s had landed, engines cooling, canopies lifting. Captain Derek Monroe climbed down from his cockpit and walked with purpose toward the control tent. Helmet off, flight suit unzipped halfway. His face was unreadable, stone steady, but eyes burning with something deep. He found Hayden waiting. Without a word, Monroe reached into the inside pocket of his flight vest, pulled out a small weathered patch, dark green, faded threads, a unit insignia from another war. He placed it in Hayden's hand. "He saved my father," Monroe said quietly. Hayden looked up. Monroe continued, his voice like gravel. "Cambodia, 72. My dad was a young tech, down Phantom. They were pinned for hours and then Whitaker showed up. No air support, no backup. Just him." He nodded once toward the sky. "Every time I've flown, I've carried this." Hayden looked down at the patch. It was torn along the edges, faint blood stain near the bottom, the kind of relic that should be in a museum, but in that moment, it felt like a holy thing, something sacred. Hayden didn't speak, he just closed his fingers around it slowly and held it. No one made an announcement, no press release followed, no headlines appeared the next day, but something changed that afternoon at Wright Field. You could feel it in the way the flight crew walked, in the way cadets stood a little taller, in the hush that followed the last pass, in the way people looked toward the east fence long after the jets were gone. No one said his name over the loudspeakers, but somehow everyone knew it now. Samuel Whitaker, combat controller, Air Force Cross, invisible for years, but never again, not after that day, because some legends don't need medals, they just need to be recognized. 1 year later, the skies over Dayton, Ohio, rumbled once again. Same airfield, same roar of engines, same hum of anticipation rolling across the tarmac like electricity before a storm. But something was different now. Down at the eastern edge of the field, beyond the shaded tents and vendor lines, just before the perimeter rope, sat a folding chair, plain, weathered, no nameplate, no podium, no fanfare, just a single neatly folded American flag draped across the seat, and resting on top of it, a patch, green, frayed at the corners, combat controller insignia. The winged dagger still proud even in faded thread. Taped to the back of the chair was a piece of notebook paper, handwritten black ink smudged at the corners by wind and sun, reserved for the ones who never asked. No one stood by it, no one guarded it, but everyone knew. Cadets were told about it in briefings, event staff were instructed not to touch it. Pilots paused when they walked past, just for a moment, just long enough, and the chair remained still, unmoving, watching the sky. The crowd returned that year just like always. Families, veterans, first-time visitors, old regulars. Many didn't notice the chair at first, but those who did never forgot it. A father pointed it out to his young son, speaking in a hushed tone. A woman in uniform left a coin on the ground beneath it, then walked away without a word. And as the announcer's voice rose again over the field, welcoming the return of the elite F-22 Raptor demo team, those who remembered began to look east. Even before the first jet took off, the Raptors launched with the same impossible grace, flawless diamond formation, razor-sharp rolls, climbs that made the air itself seem thinner. But when it came time for the final maneuver, no one blinked, no one asked if something had gone wrong, because now the solo pass wasn't a deviation, it was tradition. Raptor 1 peeled away, silent, smooth, and dropped low, 50 feet above the fence. Wings level, nose dip up just slightly, passing over that single empty chair, and every eye followed, not the jet, the moment, a moment that had no name in the program, but every pilot on that team knew it. Every cadet in training heard the story. If you see the wings level and the nose dip, it's for him. No official ceremony followed, no speeches, no banner, but year after year, the chair remained, and with it, something more powerful than a tribute, a memory, a promise, a quiet kind of monument. Built not with stone or steel, but with reverence, with a nod, a pause, a low pass that said more than words ever could, because some heroes never asked for the spotlight, never stepped on stage, they simply carried more than we'll ever know. And when their names fade from paper, their legacy lingers in the silence, in the space they once held, in the chair by the fence at Wright Field. If you ask the right airman or the right pilot at the right time, they'll tell you the story about the day an old man sat alone, the day a jet broke formation, and the moment a crowd turned, not toward the sky, but toward a man who had once stood between life and death and chose duty. They don't always get the details right, but they all remember how it felt, and that's what matters most, because in the end, some heroes don't need medals, they just need to be seen. In our darkest moments, Kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that. Today someone isn't going hungry, and sometimes that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.